Five, four, three, two, one.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Coach's Corner on the Fitter and Faster platform with your host, Mike Murray, as always. Today, I'm pleased to introduce Brent Arckey from Sarasota. We're going to have Coach Brent talking about a number of different things today, but I wanted to start with Brent. You are now in your 11th season. And Brent, in that time that you've been the head coach, how have you guys grown as an organization, and how have you fought through some of the pandemic? Because in Florida, it's been a little bit different.
Sure. So, well, again, 11 years in Sarasota. I've been there in different capacity. I've kind of climbed the ranks until I became the head coach in 2014. So I feel like one of my strong suits is I've been a part of the program for a long time, and I kind of know what is expected, what the culture is. The Sarasota Sharks have just a crazy tradition. This is actually our 60th year in existence. So, that drives a lot of what I do, is the tradition that we have down here. Grown, we've been through some interesting challenges. We have been a Y team for a long time. The life cycle of this team has been, it's weathered a lot of storms over the years. It's gone through parent boards, it's gone through YMCA ownership, and now currently we are contracted with the county to run and operate the facility. And we also have this nonprofit also runs the swim team as well. So that's been in the last 3 years or so that has kind of taken place. So that's been a really interesting. It's been a lot of work, but it's been a really interesting process. We had, again, probably some down years there from a membership standpoint, and now that we've kind of stabled everything, and we've actually started to grow a little bit. Now some of that is leading into one, we have growth in Florida like crazy, and that really hasn't stopped now during COVID. So like you mentioned, it's a little different down here. It's a lot more open, right? But I will tell you that a lot of that responsibility falls on us as coaches or facility managers to take care of everything. So there's some good and bad with that. Obviously, there's some people out there that, we're wide open, we can do whatever we want, and I don't really want to run a facility like that, right? So because I don't want to be in the front page of the news that we've run some super spreader event. And so there's some of that you have to deal with, but we're very fortunate. We've been able to swim. We've been able to swim in pretty much as normal. Maybe some pared back practice schedules, maybe not as long of blocks of time, just because we're spread out. We're still 4 to a lane, really, two to each side in each lane. We're still doing that for our entire program. And again, we're lucky enough to do that. I'm not delusional on that. There are a lot of people that would die for that. But at the same time, there's a lot of management that goes along with it. And I will tell you that we're, along with a lot of our rules, it's a lot of management, but we've only had 2 kids that have tested positive out of our entire program. And they have family members that are on the medical side of things. So, again, I think we just have a culture of, we're trying to take care of each other. We're trying to give everybody the opportunity to get better. So I've been really proud of my crew, just because they've really bought into this. There's some long days in there, but also the membership is just really bought into trying to take care of each other so we can all do what we need to do.
I so appreciate that type of approach, and we're trying to do similar things here. It is a little bit more of a challenge in the Northeast, but everybody has their own challenges at their own facilities, right? I know that you've tried to make it a point to keep your operations going so that your athletes have something to look forward to every day. Is that right?
No doubt. I think really the growth that we are seeing, and we're seeing it on the Masters side too, which is, hey, if you haven't been paying attention, keeping yourself in shape and staying moving is an important thing. And so we've seen a lot of our growth has been on, hey, we school is really, really important. We are doing a ton of school, but man, we really we want to have an opportunity to do something athletic outside of the pool. And so we have a couple of groups that are a few times a week, very non-committal, and those have grown probably more than just about anything. Not to say that we haven't had some growth on the competitive side, but we've seen a lot of that where, hey, I want to stay moving. I want to be outdoors. And again, a big difference for us is we're outdoors year round. For better or for worse, it was 35 degrees this morning on the pool deck, so I'm not going to complain too much because I've seen you out there with snow on the deck. But I'm still wiping ice off my windshield, so standing on the deck. Um, but yes, I mean, you can't argue the benefit of being in a group with your teammates, kids your age, social interaction, getting off the computer. And these guys are sitting at the computer right now. A lot of them are doing online classes. And so, man, they're just trying to get out of the house. I can't imagine. I think back to me being a little kid sitting in front of a computer for 6 hours. There's no way. There's no way I would have done it, or I would have drove my mom crazy. Um, you can't underestimate what we're doing here and what our role is. Yes, we're about high performance, we're about fast swimming, but man, we're also doing something a lot bigger than that, which is giving kids a healthy outlet to grow and develop.
Sarasota Sharks has such a tradition of excellence. What is it like now being the head coach there for a few years in a row now and having the responsibility to continue that proud legacy? What's that like? I don't think a lot of club coaches really understand what it's like to jump into a high level program like that with such a storied history. And now you are in charge of everything. What's that like?
Well, I guess the short answer is I couldn't tell you what it's not like because I haven't been in that position. So I just kind of take it day by day, but it's not something that I take lightly. I mean, as I said before, we're on our 60th year of existence. A lot of the struggles that we went through when the YMCA wanted to get rid of the program, a lot of my motivation was, man, I can't let 60 years of tradition, multiple Olympians, I can't let that just disappear, not on my watch. And so that's been my motivation for quite some time, and I feel very responsible for the history and the legacy and the people that came before me. And I try to teach that to the kids and the other coaches. We've done a really good job of getting a new record board up, getting our Olympic trial qualifiers up. I'm working on the history of all the head coaches that have come through here, and you start digging through some of this stuff, and I mean, there's some names that have come through here. uh, Little known fact, Greg Troy swam for the Sarasota Sharks. It was his first swim team and I believe his first coaching job long ago. He's a Sarasota High grad. So there's history that goes way back. I mean, I guess, sure, there's pressure and there's expectations that come along with it. I'm okay with that. I mean, I knew what I signed up for. If I didn't want it, then I would have done something else. So I have good support groups. I have a wife that understands swimming. She was an open water national swimmer. So she gets it, understands the hours, and again, I just want to there's a lot of great stuff that has come along, and my job is to just make it better. Take all of the things that were great and add a little bit of what I believe is going to make us better. Teach everybody around here that we got to keep evolving. We're not going to do the same things we were doing 50 years ago and expect to be successful. So, I mean, I guess there's a lot. I guess it could be heavy. I choose not to look at it that way. And I've surrounded myself with a staff that really buys into what the Sarasota culture is, and just really loves this place and wants to make it better.
You have a rich personal history with the state of Florida and swimming in Florida and your experience as an athlete. Talk to us a little bit about what your experience was like growing up in swimming and who some of your biggest influencers are.
Well, I feel like I'm very lucky in a lot of ways. So I was a great age grouper. I was a good high school swimmer. I was a mediocre college swimmer, probably an early developer by most people's standards. That has definitely made me look at the progression of what we do a little differently. I would be lying if I told you that that didn't have an effect on me. And I mean, I was one of those guys that at 11 or 12 years old, swimming in the senior group, 10 or 11 times and lifting weights and all that kind of stuff. And so I'd like to think that I've learned a lot from that, and a great experience. I mean, I don't see it as a negative really at all. It's just different looking back on it now that I'm a little bit older and can reflect on it. But I think when I start to look, you kind of asked me, I have a few things ready. So I was kind of thinking about kind of my progression of swimming and how lucky I have actually been, and not to just go through a name drop, but my first swim coach was my first real influential swim coach was Mike Heath, who was a 1984 Olympian. That was in Jacksonville. Moved into Orlando. I swam for Mitch Ivy, Bill Peak, and his assistants. And anybody who doesn't know those guys, they should look them up. I swam for Clay Parnell, who is probably one of the most uh, decorated high school coaches in Florida and maybe the country, and just consistent. He's been there for forever. I swam for Arthur Albiero at University of Alabama and Don Wagner at University of Alabama, Glenn Newfield for a year. After I left Alabama, I got to work with Nancy Hennessy and Chris Oliver, who again, I think are some of the most underrated coaches on the planet. If you don't know them, you should look them up. They worked for John Morse for a long time and have got me connected to John Morse. And then I started working with the University of Florida with Coach Troy, Coach Nesty, Coach Wilby. And so that was the beginning of my career, where I was coaching 8 and unders at the same time I was working with Olympic champions. And I think there's compounding with my background and my growth as an athlete, having that experience of coaching 8 and unders at the same time you're coaching world record holders. I think if I was telling somebody to go learn to coach, like that's how you get to do it. And I kind of fell into it. I don't want anybody to think that it was like some premeditated thing. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time and took advantage of an opportunity. And so then at that point, I was, I'm working the full coaching grind, right? 5 o'clock in the morning until 8:30 at night. I'm doing everything from 8 and unders to masters to, standing on the deck whenever I can, whenever anybody's, swimming fast, I want to be there. And you do that stuff when you're young and you don't have a bunch of things to tie you down. And then I had to start making a living, and Steve Brown called me, which again, kind of goes back to my uh, age group career. I think he was the zone head coach when I was on a zone team when I was 13 years old or something like that. And so he called me and was like, "Hey, do you want to come down to Sarasota? I don't have a whole lot of money, but I got a job, full-time job." And I was like, "Does it have benefits?" And he was like, "Yep." And I was like, "All right, I'll be there." And the rest here is kind of history, and learning from Sherwood and Steve, Sherwood Watson, Steve Brown, about running a bigger club and kind of a tradition of excellence. Some of it is luck, some of it is being in the right place at the right time and taking advantage of situations. But I've been very fortunate in my experience to just learn from a lot of people. And a lot of those guys that I mentioned, they all coached or swam for the legends, right? They all swam for the Randy Reeses or the Don Gambrels or the Councilmans. So it's been, Troy will tell you that Swedenham's been a real influence on him. So I've just had the opportunity to be exposed to so much that I just can't I can't stress enough how thankful I am for all of those opportunities that I've had along the way.
Yeah, I like to bounce stuff off Coach Troy before I do things too.
Yeah,
It's
he's
just good. It's good
he's
to get.
honest, man.
Yeah, it's good to get that perspective, and sometimes it's a real cold, hard, quick
Sure.
answer, and other times, it's really thoughtful, and you have to appreciate that. And what a list of names that you've been able to learn from and grow from and influence your philosophy as a coach. And one of the things I enjoy talking to our coaches about the most on this program is their development. And you mentioned 4 or 5 things that I think many of us did, the life that we lived. We got to the pool, morning practice. And those early years when I was coaching college, I wasn't leaving until after West Coast recruiting calls. And you were always around, didn't miss meets. What advice do you have, Brent, for those young coaches who are coming up? Maybe some of those young coaches on your staff. What advice do you have for them as they start to develop their careers?
So look for opportunities that make you uncomfortable. That's probably the number one thing that I tell people. Don't Obviously you've got to pay the bills, right? But don't be so worried about money early on that you don't get the experience that will actually get you the ability to make money later on, right? Like take the short-term loss for the long-term gain. Find a mentor. I think that's a little cliche, but find a mentor, and I'll share, my experience with Troy bringing me into the office, and he asked me point blank. He was like, what do you want to get out of this? What do you want to do? And I told him, I said, I want to be a head coach by the time I'm 30. And he was like, all right. And at that point, he knew what I wanted, and he was going to do everything he felt was necessary to set me up for that. So I guess the what I would share is don't be afraid to find a mentor that you can share your goals with, and that cares enough about you that they'll make you uncomfortable enough to get you to where you want to go. And I think don't run from the uncomfortable, lean into the uncomfortable, because I think that's going to make you a lot better long term. If you can find the opportunity to work with somebody who maybe does it differently than you did as a swimmer, I think that's important as well. You may come back to those things that made you successful as an athlete, but you're going to coach hundreds of kids that come through the your program. And so you've got to have other ideas of ways to get to individuals if the way that doesn't work, because it's going to happen. If you have a group of 30 kids, they're all not going to be respond the same way to what you did or what you believe at the time is right. So finding other ways to do it, and then trying to find a way to fit that into what you believe is works for you.
Absolutely. And what I appreciate is you have some great perspective on that, right? Not everybody is going to respond to our own thought process in terms of development. How are we developing our athletes' ability to sprint? What are their aerobic capabilities? How athletic are they? Am I thinking about their physical literacy? These are all things that we're considering all the time. And sometimes, you get defined, whether it's fairly or unfairly, by the programs that you came out of, right? So here you are as a young coach. People know that you coached with Coach Troy, and when we say Coach Troy, there's a lot of things that we can think about, right? So, what are some things that you took away from working there, and how did it shape your philosophy in regards to training and preparing your athletes?
So, Troy, I'm I'm a my wife swam for Troy. I work for Troy, so always I'm a big fan of Coach Troy. Take that for what it's worth. So I have a lot of influences from him. I, when people ask me this, I think the one thing that is way underappreciated for him is these guys that have been the real elite performers. They have great relationships with him that are based on pure honesty. And I think that we throw around the term, relationship coach and all of that. And I think a lot of people make that sound like it's some flowery thing all the time. And I think that if you have a really good relationship with anybody, you should be able to have honest conversations with them. And sometimes that may be things that are a little prickly or a little hard to hear, but you trust that person enough that you appreciate their honesty. And he's really, really good at creating relationships in an honest manner. Um, I think he also gets a rap for volume. I would tell you that Troy's probably more intense and his intensity is a lot higher and longer than most people's, not necessarily a volume standpoint. Does he do some volume? Of course he does. I think probably what I took from him was volume is important from a skill acquisition standpoint. You've got to do a lot of reps well. And so if that takes some volume to do it, then so be it. He definitely puts an emphasis on that, and which manifests itself maybe in some volume. The other piece is he's just willing to challenge people, and I don't think that can go unappreciated in a world where it's very easy to kind of run from what's hard. He again, I think, comes back to those relationships. I mean, I think I remember there was a group of underwater kick guys with him that were into how many underwater 25s we could do on the fastest possible interval, and I'm not even sure that came from him. I think it came from the athletes. They were like, oh, we heard these guys over in at Stanford were doing this, and we want to try it. And Troy's like, all right, let's get after it. So again, I think that goes back to the relationships that he has.
There's no doubt about that, and I so appreciate that aspect of coaching in and of itself. We are constantly searching for the best way to relate and communicate, as you mentioned, to the kids. I think some of the things that we've lost along the way of trying to find that secret ingredient is not being afraid to come in and say, listen, guys, we're going hard today. This is going to be a challenge, but it can be fun too. So how are you incorporating aspects of fun into your program on a daily basis at Sarasota?
Well, I think it's been more and more a challenge here with COVID, right? Because we're all
Right.
spread out all over the place, and I'm yelling to get to everybody. I feel like I need to have a megaphone all the time, and it's a lot of moving. And I wish I could, spend a little more time with each individual person. It's just really hard. I didn't realize, how difficult that was going to be going back and forth on either side of the pool all the time. And actually, I mean, maybe I'm getting older. I don't know. I get way more tired going back and forth all the time than I used to. Um, but fun. Again, you kind of alluded to it, right? When we've got something on a piece of paper that's going to be difficult, I have found that just laying it all out there up front and telling everybody what it's going to be. Hey guys, I expect you to support each other. I would probably say I'm not the world's most fun guy on the planet. It's not my strong suit. I think I'm probably better one-on-one going back and forth with somebody, jokingly, than I am like creating hey, we're going to go relays every day kind of guy. That's not my style. So again, I think I'm sure we'll talk a little more about relationships, but trying to be honest in those and with what we're going to do that day, and empowering the kids to make it fun. So if you've got the jokester boy over in lane 3, you kind of let him do his thing because he's got his role in the practice. Kind of knowing what your group is made of as a whole, and kind of letting them do their thing within your parameters, right? Hey, we're going to work hard. My big thing is we're going to work hard and we're going to be respectful. I'll deal with everything else in between, right? So if you're allowed to do what you need to do as long as you're being respectful and as long as you're working hard. So, I guess my approach is giving a little more leeway for people to be themselves, and hopefully sometimes your group makeup is a little different, right? I've definitely learned that over the years is sometimes you drive the bus a little bit more because you don't have some of the natural leaders. Sometimes you've got to create a little more fun because you don't have a goofball in the group, or I think you get smarter as you've been around for a little while, and you start becoming a little more of a chameleon for what your group needs. So, I mean, that was a long way to answer that question, but I think I allow them to try to enjoy the hard work, by supporting each other and allowing them to work within within our constraints.
Yeah, and you mentioned a couple things there that I want to talk about, and that resonated with me. First of all, it's a different dynamic at practice right now, right? We have athletes at either end of the pool. And when you said that, I was thinking to myself, my gosh, I'm doing the exact same thing. So there's conversations between the athletes, and they're positive for the most part, happening at this end. I'm explaining at this end, and then I got to go back to the other end. And that's a different dynamic, right? And so you're right. You don't have as much time as you normally would to necessarily engage with the athletes in the way that you normally would. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think there's a lot of coaches out there going through the same thing.
Sure.
As far as the relationships go and building relationships with your athletes, they start to kind of identify and know exactly what makes us tick, what makes us happy, what makes us excited, what gets their coach enthused. How are you talking to your staff about engaging with the athletes, and what are some key takeaways that you want them to have at practice every day?
So, so with my staff, actually Ian Murray, at Dynamo was somebody that I was talking to about this, and we kind of run the same dry land system, and we use a lot of what we do before we get in the pool as not only an opportunity to do warm up to swim, but talk to your athletes. And I was listening to him talk, and it started making me realize, maybe I didn't recognize how important that 10 minutes before and 10 minutes after is. And I think our staff does that, maybe just because that's all what we've always done. But I think that during COVID, we've recognized how important it really is. Hey, get there 10 or 15 minutes early. Don't be afraid to stay 10 or 15 minutes. And those could be, I think I got in some ridiculous political debate with one of the kids. And, that ended up being a catalyst to a really great season, just because I met him on his level, and he understood that we had some sort of common ground. And so, again, the before and after, I think, is something that you can't take for granted. As far as in the pool, one of the biggest things, and I'm not great about it, is I give feedback or corrections, and then, because we're so spread out, I tend to move on, and I probably need to follow up with that correction or that conversation. And so we talk a lot about connecting the dots. Don't just leave something open ended. Again, I'm not sure I'm great about it all the time, because I'm trying to get to everybody, and I think sometimes I start driving home and I'm like, man, they did a good job. I should have followed up with them and told them that they made a good correction there. So again, I think that has come back to make sure you've got good staff and staff that knows their role. I've got a couple of guys. One's been a Shark forever, or he grew up a Shark, swam at South Carolina, has come back, and now he's coaching with us. And I've got another guy who's been with me for a long time, who's now working with me right now on our top group, and he's fantastic at either coming by and going, Brent, follow up with him, or he'll follow up for me. So he knows I'm running around, and I think good assistants are just invaluable in that respect. So that's kind of what we're talking about as a staff. Um, I On the athlete end, I and I think there's some real positive to this. Taking a lot more ownership and being independent it's always been kind of a cornerstone of what I do, but I think it's more so now. Hey, you better know your stroke count. You better know your time. You better know your kick counts. You better, I'm not here to just click a stopwatch for you for the next 2 hours. I'm not here to count your strokes for you. You got to be engaged in what you're doing. So I think a lot of it is kind of flipping a lot of people's, a lot of these athletes' mindsets to, if I come by and I go, hey, what are your counts? And if they can reel them off, then I know you're engaged, right? I guess they could be, they could just throw some numbers at me, but again, that's a choice that they're making, and it's their career. And probably 5 or 6 years ago, I would have lost my mind about something like that. But I think now I'm much more patient with, hey, this is your choice. You don't if you want to give me bad information, I'm not going to be able to give you good information back. So that's kind of both sides of it, I think.
Brent, that's great because it's cathartic to hear you talk about that. And it's things that we're experiencing here at Victor as well. There are times where I think to myself on the ride home, I didn't do a good job of recognizing Johnny or Sally's intention, attitude, and effort there. And I should have made a point to get back to that. So that was really cathartic for me to hear you say that. And then the other thing that really hit home with me is that, you're trying to teach this accountability piece. We can only do so much, right? And this is something that I spend a lot of time talking about with our athletes and with our staff. We can create an environment. We can point a certain direction, but ultimately we have to inspire these kids to do it for themselves. And if they're doing it for themselves because they're realizing that it's important to their goals, they're going to supplement what their teammates are doing. And when their teammates' goals are as important to them as their own goals, that's a culture that really flourishes. So how do you encourage being a great teammate at Sarasota Sharks?
Well, I think a lot of it starts with just setting the tone early in the season. Almost, again, a little different in COVID because we kind of didn't know exactly what all the meets were going to look like, yada yada yada. But we still sat down in the fall. We're pretty open and honest. We throw things up on a dry erase board. You're filling out goal sheets, and those goal sheets are some personal goals, but they're also some team goals. We throw team goals up on the dry erase board. It's pretty much all out there. There's no hiding it. There's no, this is what we want to do. Then it's just a reminder along the way, right? Are these choices that you're making in line with the goals that we talked about as a team? And that's kind of our line with just about everybody, parents and athletes, is, hey, listen, it's not personal. You told me that this is what you wanted to accomplish, and my job is to help you get to where you want to go. And again, we might not always agree exactly on how to get there, but I'm the swim coach that's supposed to be helping you get to where you said you wanted to be. And so if I have to remind you that maybe these behaviors or these habits or this pace or this stroke count, whatever it may be, doesn't equate to what you told me you want to be, you can choose to take offense to that, or you can choose to dig in and make a change. And again, I think I've become much more patient with that than maybe I would have been years ago. But I think it's a goal setting process. It's being open about what we want to do. And then I think one of the things that we haven't done quite as well in COVID, just because of team meetings have been a little strange. Every now and then you got to do some check-ins on that. What did we talk about in the fall? Do we need to adjust what that looks like? Do we need to change the course somewhere? Do we need to raise the bar? Did we already kill it and we gotta raise the bar? I think probably we do a better job of that internally in staff meetings, talking about that kind of stuff. And as I sit here and talk about it, maybe it's something we could work on, as far as, hey, just because we talked about it in a staff meeting doesn't necessarily mean the athletes know what we're expecting, or that, hey, we've decided we're going to raise the bar. If we believe in buy-in, like, we've got to tell them that we're raising the bar too.
I totally agree. And I like that you're very self-evaluative, and then you're evaluative from a team and a staff standpoint, to where you're thinking about what's our next move going to be, because this is where we are right now. I can really appreciate that perspective. One thing that I want to ask you about, and you've mentioned several times, this year due to COVID, that phrase, which is really important, and we're all going through it. We're finding particularly our 11th and 12th graders are really struggling the most, right? So they've had their proms taken away. They've had their college recruiting visits taken away. They've had junior nationals taken, our training trip taken away. All the things that the kids in our program traditionally look forward to at those ages, that in a certain sense, they believe they have earned, right? All of these things have been kind of taken away. And, we can plan as a staff to engage with them better, give them a little extra TLC, make sure we're meeting them in their space every day. But are you seeing similar effects on that age group in Florida?
Yeah, so I've heard a lot of people talking about this, and I hadn't really dealt with it too much until very recently. Like I'm talking within the last month or so, and that may just be because we've been fairly normal up until you start getting to second semester of your. I think last year everybody, hey, this is a pandemic. We know we're gonna have to give some things up. It's not gonna be comfortable, but you almost like could understand it. You almost rationalize it a little bit. This sucks, but we'll deal with it. Class of 2020, we'll deal with it. And now all of a sudden it's like, all right, class of 2021, this might be a real thing in 21. Shoot, this might be a real thing in 22 still. Um, so I'm starting to see it now a little bit more than maybe I had heard of early on, and I think again that's just a function of being in Florida. How are we handling it? And we'll do as much as we can to replicate. Again, we're outdoors, right? So we can do some things like we're going to have a banquet, right? It's going to be outdoors in a pavilion, and we're all going to be spread out 6 feet apart. We're going to have big old speakers, and we'll make it work, right? Trying to create some sort of normalcy, but I also think mental health is a thing, right? It's been a huge thing. Everybody's talking about it. Only a handful of people have taken advantage of it, but I tell everybody that I'm in my office from 2 o'clock until 2:55, right? You are always welcome to come in, shut the door. You're allowed to cry. You're allowed to cuss at me. You're whatever. You're allowed to. Anything goes, right? And I've had a handful over the years take advantage of that. And then there are also days that, and again, goes back to your relationships, right? You got to be honest enough with your coach, and that you can walk in and go, hey, coach, I just need a day. I need a day, or I need a practice. And then it's my job as the coach to kind of read the situation. Is it something that I should be prying into, or is it just all right, let me know what I can do and I'll see you tomorrow? And again, I think that goes back to your relationship. You can read the athlete. Is this athlete about ready to break down, and you need to have a conversation with them about it, or is it, hey, they just need a day. They just need a day. And these kids they're in different spots than they've got a lot of pressure on them. Again, very different than maybe the way I grew up, but a lot of these guys are in heavy they're in heavy stress from school, heavy stress from swimming. And I think now that I'm not, not to get political or anything, but it's harder and harder to pay for college and try to find ways to get into college that's affordable for you long term. And so I think there's, yes, we're a wealthy sport, but a lot of us are middle class or upper middle class, and it's a lot of money to go to college. So I get it. I get all that stuff, and I just try to be there. I don't know if I have a magic answer for that. I just try to be there and be supportive.
I think you and I really came up at the same time in coaching and going through the ranks. And, one of the things that took me a while to really understand in the transition from young coach to now being a more seasoned coach, the first thing I'm thinking about at the beginning of the season is where can we develop these athletes? What are their goals? How can we get them to their goals? Where early in our career, I think, certainly for me, and I'm not sure for you, but I was thinking to myself, this athlete's not that far away from this time standard. This athlete's not far away from making this national team. What are things that I can do right now to get them there? And the transition for me kind of occurred when, my stepchildren were going through the process of developing as young athletes, to where it started to become much more of a holistic approach. How is swimming going to be the vehicle that gets them to the next step? And I know, and you mentioned this earlier, you do some work with Vern, and you have a close relationship with Ian Murray, and those are two of the best practitioners in the sport of understanding developing people before athletes. What's your perspective on that, Brent?
Well, again, I think it goes back to a little bit of my personal experience. 11 or 12 years old in the national group at one of the best programs in the country at the time, and there's some good and bad to that. I'm not sure that every 12 or 13-year-old needs to be exposed to some of the stuff that 17 and 18-year-olds are doing. So again, I think I was predisposed to have some sort of differing opinion in that when I started coaching. And then when I came, well, Chris and Nancy at Gator Swim Club, and they were at Bowls before Gator Swim Club. Chris and Nancy were really big on the development of the whole athlete. And so again, we were really looking at progression at the same time that I was, like I told you, coaching those 8 and unders and those medalists all at the same time. And so I was kind of inundated with this idea of progression, and probably didn't know exactly how I thought that would work until I became a head coach. Um, and really, when I first got to Sarasota, there's progression. We're not in a hurry to move people through the program unless there's exceptional situations. And so I think that was probably the beginning of it. Was you'll probably hear me say this if we continue to go through some of this stuff, is like lowest possible effective dose, right? So what that's I think that's a never ending evaluation process for me. Is okay, fine, I've got some volume and I've got some work in my background, and but man, we've got some really good, going off on a tangent here, but I've got some really good milers right now that aren't doing anywhere near as much as we used to, right? So what and why is that? And I think some of that goes back to the progression and the holistic approach. Is, do we really need stressed out 11 and 12-year-olds about, at the flag level? Are we trying to win the age group championship meet? If you win the age group championship meet, that's awesome. That's fantastic. And I don't want that to sound like anything more than it is. It's awesome. But if they're so stressed out about that when they go and move up to the next age group, that they struggle with the idea of, I have to climb the ladder again when I'm 13, 14. Like, I don't think we haven't done them any justice. And then the second piece of that is been the dry land, and knowing that athletes are not they're not moving like we did in middle school, elementary school, um, for a myriad of reasons, right? So one of the things that we're doing right now, and again, my assistant coaches are really into it, and we're very influenced by Vern. I mean, Vern's with us every other day because he lives in Sarasota. So we got 10 and under boys that are running across the pool deck, excited about throwing the dodgeball on one foot or with their left hand or whatever, because we're I don't know, are you allowed to play dodgeball anymore? We do. We play it. And so we're trying to be athletic, but sneaking it into games, and then the games turn into a little more movement based, and then we might turn them into some resistance. And so then all of a sudden you're leaving some things that they can keep adding while they're growing, and also you can take some things away if you've got a boy who's grown 5 inches in the last year and he just needs to rest. Like, you're allowed to do that. Like, it's okay to do that. So I mean, I don't know if that answers your question, but the progression is a huge cornerstone to what we're doing.
I really appreciate that. And, now you've opened up this whole other line of questioning that I want to get into, because Vern was great about promoting this Coach's Corner episode. He had it up all over the place, which is great. And we're so appreciative of that. Talk to me about games and dryland, because so many of us are sick and tired of what we've put together in September by the time we get to January, right? And we're always hearing from the athletes, this is the same thing. We do the same thing every year, just variation. So talk to me about how you've gamified your dry land and some of the things that you do with Vern.
Well, so I don't want to take too much credit for it. A lot of it is my head age group coach, Andrew Eckhart, who um, is really he was with us from 2012, stepped away to go to Miami for a little bit, and coached at Gulliver Prep, and then came back. Has a teaching background, um, and is really into pedagogy, and so he has taken some of the Vern aspects of what we do and the gain swimming, um, and has really just kind of taken them himself and created modules and um, just opportunities for kids to have fun while learning how to move their bodies. And so, again, I don't want to make it sound like it's some like life changing thing, but it is. What I do know is that the kids want to be there, right? So instead of like dragging their bags in, they're like throwing their stuff on the bleachers and hauling over to whoever's running dryland that day. And again, it's relay races, doing crab walks, or it's how far can you jump. It's a, like I said, a dodgeball game that you're using 1 foot, one arm, just trying to take what we do at the highest level and we pare it down. And just, I mean, that's really the whole process is, all right, what do we do at the top? And then what if and I think the other piece to it is we all have kids right now. We all have like I think the three of our full-time coaches, we've got 6 kids that are all ages 2 to 7 or something like that. So we're really in tune to, all right, would my kid want to do this? And what. So I think that's been really influential as well. I'm trying to think of real specifics. I mean, the dodgeball one is the one that everybody like loves. They all. I mean, I keep talking about it, but especially the boys. And I think we got to do a better job in general of getting boys in the sport and keeping boys in the sport. And in Florida, you can play all the sports year round. So we got to find other ways to get them there. And I think dryland and games is definitely an opportunity to do that.
It's really an exciting part of our job, right? Like dryland is becoming so much more influential across our sport. It's a buzzword. Everybody's looking for the next best thing, but I think you've already kind of found the rhythm, and the rhythm is play,
Yeah.
and learning to develop your physical literacy through play. You mentioned it earlier, but when you and I were kids, I mean, I was outside all day. My brothers and I were outside all day. And culture's changed, and it's different. And that's not any, I think a mistake that coaches make is they latch on to that and the back in my day kind of approach. But it's different. It's culturally different. Moms and dads aren't home to kind of supervise anymore, right? And so it's a sign of the times, but play at practice allows them to explore that again and maybe develop some skills that they're not developing on their own, right?
No doubt. I think there's plenty of literature out there on structured and unstructured free play, right? And I think maybe again, we talked about it early. I kind of have my parameters. Like we're going to work hard. We're going to be respectful. Like that's kind of how I view the play thing. It's like, all right, we're not going to do anything dumb where we're going to get injured, but at the same time, we're going to stay moving, and we're going to I think everything's about staying in whatever your parameters are. We spend so much time trying to prescribe and micromanage every movement. And again, I think some of this comes from my 4-year-old son, where, man, if I wanted to chase him around all day, I mean, I guess I could, but why? I mean, why am I going to try to tell him how to climb the ladder? Like if he wants to go backwards on his hands up the ladder, what do I care? Like he's going to fall a foot? I mean, it's not, when he's just having fun, right? He's just screwing around and having fun. So I think I had a parent meeting one time where I was talking. This is early on when I had the kid, climbing up the stairs, right? And I feel like that's a lot of what we do is, you know, I'm going to let you climb up the stairs. I'm probably going to stand 1 or 2 stairs behind you. And if you fall, I'll let you fall a stair or two. I'm not going to let you fall the whole flight, right? But I want you to struggle. I want you to figure out how to get it done. But I'm not going to let you fall flat on your face. And I think, again, as I've become a parent, that's one of the things that's the way I look at a lot of the things that we do is I want you to exert yourself, stress yourself, be excited about trying something new, be excited about trying something hard. And if you fall back a couple of steps, no big deal, right? It's no big deal. We'll just do it again. And I kind of feel that way about coaching a lot of the time too.
Love that, man. That's a great segue into our quick fire questions because that's a great response. And our job is not to blaze the trail, right? We can show the direction, but they got to create their own path. And I really appreciate that perspective. All right, you ready to jump into these? These are going to be fun.
Sure, let's do it.
Or maybe not so much, depending on your memories. The first one that I want to go to, favorite memory of Greg Troy on deck at practice in a particularly challenging workout.
How excited he was. I believe it was 2008. And there was a set of 8 100s from blocks, 2008, so leading up to the Olympics. And I remember Ryan going 2 100s of each stroke from the blocks. And you got to remember at the time, I think in 2008, I might screw up some names here, but I'm pretty sure Sean Frazier was still there, NCAA champion in the fly. Rex Tullius was there. I think he was 4th in the 200 backstroke that year, maybe in 2008. But he was there and a hell of a backstroker. Clark Burkle, I think, was still there, breaststroke. And I think young Brett Frazier was there. They were all just, killing each other on these 8 100s from the block. And I just remember, Troy just being super excited, getting everybody all riled up and racing. And for whatever reason, that just really sticks out of my mind, just because when do you see that those kind of people all in? And a couple of the names may be wrong, but there were no slouches going 8 100s from the blocks that day. And man, they were just killing each other. It was a lot of fun to watch, and a lot of fun to watch Troy just kind of manipulate the whole situation.
Every athlete that you just made had finished in the top 5 at NCAAs at some point or another.
Yeah, sure.
And doing a lactate set, that had to have been really exciting.
Yeah, fun.
Another Gator type of question here, and I've asked every one of my guests on Coach's Corner this question this year is, does it take a sub 21 second performance to win the 50 freestyle in Tokyo?
I hope so. That would be awesome. That would be great. That would be great for the sport. It'd be great to see. That would be awesome. Let's say yes. Yes, it does. That would be awesome. Just for the sake of the sport. That'd be awesome.
It's about 50-50 right now with guests. So that's great. I'm glad that you answered that way. All right. We can say her name now because everybody knows she's right at it. Do we see that 8-minute mark go down by Ledecky this time around?
It's hard to say because we haven't seen what she's been doing recently. But I think I'll probably always go back to, man, I hope so, because it's great for the sport, right? It's just awesome for the sport. Every time somebody does something like that, you all of a sudden you open the door for a whole bunch of people to start going 8:10, right? 8:10 is just not a big deal anymore. And that's what I'm excited about. So I'm going to, again, for the sake of the sport, I'm going to say yes. I hope so.
We talk about some of the world records out there, and you look at the 200 IM world record and 154 flat. I think that one's in danger too. But it's going to be a fun Olympics to watch. How have you managed so far with your parents and athletes who might have trial cuts to kind of emotionally wrap their head around the fact that we're going to be at 2 meets?
So again, this may come across as patting myself on the back, but early on last year, when all of this started, I sat down everybody that had trial cuts and said, hey, listen, this is you got to wrap your head around that, the possibility of this just not happening or being extremely modified. Again, I have a little bit of a unique situation. So I guess my approach was, hey, we're going to find a place to swim fast. It doesn't matter if it's in Omaha or not. We're going to find a place to swim fast, and we'll be ready, because we spend 12 months out of the year teaching these kids to adapt. Right? This is no different. This is no different. Don't make it more than it really is. It's a swim meet, and we're going to swim fast, and we'll find a place to swim fast. Now, I understand that not everybody has had that opportunity to necessarily swim fast, especially in the long course pool. And really, when we got back in the water in the fall, it was kind of the same thing. I called the parents and the athletes and said, hey, listen, we're going to have to be flexible. We're going to have to be flexible, and we're not going to sit around and complain about whatever the decision is that's made. We're just going to figure it out, and we'll keep working hard. Again, USA Swimming, I think, probably did exactly what they had to do in order to make this thing work. And so I haven't had anybody. I'm sure there are some people that are upset, that they're maybe not in wave 2, but again, let's go to work and make wave 2 cuts then. I mean, they're just cuts, right? They're just cuts, and I try not to make it too complicated. And we work with such developing athletes that they really put their mind to it. They can get it done, right? We're coaching young athletes that if they put their mind to it, they can get it done.
No doubt about it. And every year we make cuts faster and the kids swim faster.
Absolutely.
So we just keep on keeping on. Brent, what does the ISL mean for the future of our sport?
Well, I'm not going to pretend like I know what happens behind closed doors, right? If we can continue to make it, if it can continue to make financial sense, it gives an opportunity for the post collegiate athletes to make a living doing this sport, which is positive. It gives our sport, when I say us, it gives this sport TV time. That's awesome. There is zero downside to that. And I think that we are good enough. I think one of the things that people are worry about is, well, they're gonna rest for this long, or they're gonna rest here. We've got the best coaches. The best coaches are gonna figure it out, right? They're gonna figure it out. I still don't see any way around the Olympics being the most important thing for us. So I just think the ISL is just another opportunity, and I think that's exciting. I think that's exciting, and as college continues to be more and more challenging, maybe there's another opportunity there as well. So I'm all for options. And people can choose what path is right for them. I just hope that it financially continues to work out. So.
And again, it goes back to your point. It's great for the sport.
Right.
All right. Last question. Probably the hardest one. Favorite venue that you've ever been to for a swimming meet?
I'm trying to decipher if it is because of fast swimming or if it's just my favorite to go to.
That's what I struggle with too, man.
Man, you can't beat Irvine, right? You can't beat Irvine. I'm sure that one comes up all the time. Beautiful weather. Us Florida guys, we'll sit out in the blazing sun all day because it's still better than what we have to deal with down here in the middle of summer. Like we'll all be in the sun and everybody else is trying to find the shade somewhere. And I've had some real good experiences in Irvine with athletes. So it probably sticks out in my mind as one of my favorite venues.
I'm particular to Santa Clara. I love that meet. Kids love that meet. California, again, for us, it's a vacation. For us, it's a vacation to get down to Sarasota. But
love to have you.
You mentioned that, those tough Florida summers. The hottest I've ever been on deck at a pool deck was when we had nationals and juniors in San Antonio a few years ago. You remember that?
Yeah. What was that? 15?
Oh, yeah. It's the hottest I've ever been on deck. It was like 114 degrees.
Yeah. Well, it's you start getting the heat index in there, and it can be brutal. Now we're a little lucky here in Sarasota because I think we're about I don't know, 2.5 miles as the crow flies from the water. So we get some wind, and that'll save you. But man, if you're in Orlando, middle of the state, it can be just flat brutal.
Yeah, for sure. Brent, how can coaches get in touch with you if they have more questions to ask?
Shoot me an email. You're always welcome to shoot me an email. B, like my first name, Arckey, my last name. So B Arckey at SarasotaSharks.org. And I'm happy to return emails, have phone calls, hear ideas, share ideas. That's what we do. So please, if you have any questions, reach out.
Brent, we appreciate your time today in the Fitter and Faster Coaches Corner. This episode will be available tonight, and we will also have it up on our YouTube channel. Thanks so much for your time, man. What a great episode. I appreciate it, and hopefully we'll see you this summer.
Awesome. Nice. Nice. Thank you for having me, and I really appreciate it.
Take care, Brent. Appreciate it. We'll see you next time, guys. Bye-bye.